In this video, we are going to discuss if-else statements as well as if-else-if statements. And we're going to just kind of continue on where we left off in our relational operators and if statement video. So if you haven't watched that yet, you definitely should. So here we have an if statement of if guess is not equal to answer. And if we look down here, we actually have if guess equals answer. So let's go ahead and just put these right next to each other and take a look. So we can see that guess not equal to answer and guess equal to equal answer. So these are both logical operators, and they are actually opposites of each other, obviously, of not equals and equals, or is equal to, or is equivalent to, rather. And so what we can actually do here is we can replace this, this line right here with just an else statement. And how an else statement works is it must be paired with an if, and it allows us to chain these together, and it simply means this is equivalent to, or all it means really, I guess I should say, is that guess not equal to answer was false. It does not mean anything else. All that it means is that this if statement was false or did not execute. And so we'll go ahead and just get rid of that. And so this is great because it works perfectly for us because there are only two options for logical operators. There's either true or false, obviously. It is either equal to or it is not equal to. Those are our only two options. Whereas with relational operators, we have greater than or less than, or greater than or equal to, or less than or equal to. So that's a very important difference. Because if we run this right now, then we won't notice any significant change from the change before. So if we put 5, we guessed wrong, the answer was too low, 7, and answer was 8, and so on and so forth. And so if we go ahead and we're going to make a change here to say that the answer is equal to 5, just for some testing purposes here. So that we can show this if-else. That worked perfectly, so that if we guessed right, that's awesome. As well as this you guessed too high and you guessed too low did not appear because we guessed correctly. But now let's see what happens if we know that guess is greater than answer and guess less than answer. Those sound pretty much like their opposites. So we're going to go ahead and replace this with an else. And so if guess is not greater than answer, then we will get you guessed too low. And so hopefully you can already see that there's an error with this, because if we guess correctly, then it still says you guessed too low, because we can't see, or we don't have any case in mind or anything in place that handles if guess is like greater than or equal to or less than or equal to. Because this if and else are chained together, and this if and else are chained together, but there's nothing tying these together. And we may not want that. And so what we can do here is we can have an else if. And so we can have guess is less than or equal to answer. Because this is the same, if we have guess is less than, else if guess less than answer. And so that chains these together, and that's all well and good. And really what we could do is something like this. So we can go ahead and just get rid of these. And now we have if guess is greater than answer, you guessed too high. Else if guess is less than answer, you guessed too low. Else you guessed right, because we've already checked greater than and less than. And so the only other option is that it has to be equal to. And so we're able to pare this down to just if, else if, and else. And we'll just go ahead and get rid of these comments, because by now we should know how an if statement works. But so this is important. This only will execute if guess greater than answer failed and guess less than answer is true. Meaning that if we guess too high, then, so if right here we guess too high, so if guess is greater than answer, then neither of these statements will even be looked at. These conditions are just jumped over entirely. And so we can test that by putting in 7, and you guessed too high. So this does not get checked, and this else statement doesn't execute because one of the if statements or else if statements that is chained together with it executed. And so this brings us to, well, what happens if we wanted to have, we had this before of you guessed wrong. Because this, we can have you guessed wrong in both cases of greater than or less than. And so, like, we can just put this cout statement inside both cases. And so we can see that this works of 9, we guessed too high, or 1, we guessed too low. But there's a better way to do this, and this is through doing what's called nesting an if statement. And so we can do something like this. If guess is not equal to answer, and then we're going to go ahead and just get rid of these entirely and have cout you guessed wrong. Exactly what we had before. Let's go ahead and just put an end line there for us. And we'll put another one here. So now we're back to this logical operation, or logical operator of guess is not equal to answer, and then the else here is guess is equal to the answer. And so now we come back to that problem of, well, we want to check as well if we're too high or too low. And so we'll say we're going to do a nested if statement. And what this means is we'll have an if statement inside of another if statement. So we'll say if guess is greater than answer, output you guessed too high. And we're going to fix that so we have some proper English here. And now we can have an else statement. You guessed too low. And we can see, so if the guess is not equal to the answer, then we're just going to automatically output you guessed wrong. And then we're going to narrow it down to exactly how that guess was incorrect. Where if the guess was greater than the answer, then we say you guessed too high. And then we have else, because the only option for our else here is that it must be, obviously, the guess is less than the answer. And it can't be less than or equal to because we're inside of this if statement of if guess is not equal to answer. So in order for this if statement to execute, two conditions must be true. Guess not equal to the answer, and guess is equal to the answer. And so, excuse me, I've been calling this a logical operator. That's actually incorrect. This is a relational operator. We'll discuss logical operators at another time. So guess is not equal to answer, and guess is equal to, and guess is greater than answer. And then in this case, we have to execute one condition must be true, guess not equal to answer, and one condition must be false, guess greater than answer. So this is the same as saying that, well, actually this is true, that guess must not be greater than the answer, and guess must not equal the answer in order for this to execute. And then otherwise, we just get the output of you guessed right. And so this handles every situation of, once again, our answer is still 5. So if we put 9, we get you guessed wrong, you guessed too high. Or if we put 1, you guessed wrong, you guessed too low. Or if we guess correctly, you simply get you guessed right. And so this is the proper way to set this up. And once again, this is through the use of if, else statements, as well as nesting if statements. And earlier in this video, we saw what if, else if, and else statements are, what they look like and how they're used. And just a very quick example of, like just logically speaking, of kind of how we can think of if, else, if, and else. And so obviously this is not correct syntax here. I'm just putting this real quick. We can think of this if we're talking to one of our friends. Hopefully we've all had friends in our lives, but specifically maybe we've had friends who we knew so well that sometimes they would simply just walk into our house when they knew that we were home. And so we could do something like this. This type of relationship that we have can be brought down to an if, else, if, and else statement. In that we might tell our friend, hey, if I'm home, just walk in. And then we can say, but if I'm not home and you still want to come over for some reason, just knock on the door and then come in. And then we have else, meaning that neither of those conditions were true. So that means I'm not home and you've knocked and there's no one else home, basically, or, then else, go away. And so we've narrowed it down to an if, an else if, and an else. And so this concludes kind of our section on if, else if, and else statements in terms of relational operators. And there will be another recording that deals with logical operators. So be sure to go ahead and check that out because it will help us know a little bit more about these, or it helps us build complex if statements.